Welcome back, golfers. Today we're going to talk about a hot debate. I didn't even know it was a hot debate, but on the internet, if you research hip bump on YouTube, this is a hot topic, and there is so much confusion on YouTube from instructors about it. So stick around, we're going to try to take out some of this confusion. So the hip bump in the golf swing. So that is a topic that a lot of teachers have talked about in their instruction over the, in the past. And it's something I think is a little bit misconstrued with most students. And I think the way that teachers teach it is a little bit confusing as well. So the hip bump in the golf swing is when the hip moves into our left side or our lead side and it helps shift our weight into impact. Now, how instructors talk about the hip bump, some say don't do a hip bump, some say make a hip bump. I think a lot of it's like misconstrued of how the hip bump should happen. Me growing up playing competitively, when going even professionally, I never thought about trying to make this movement in my body because it should happen naturally. The movement through the golf ball and our transition towards the target should move our weight to our lead side. So let's talk about an area that is not an area of debate on the internet, and that's impact. So impact, we want to be in an open hip position. You can see it this way. Hips are open. As we're driving into that ball, hips are open. Our weight's shifted to our left side. Our head stays very still. And what we get into is this K position in our body. You can see the K right there. And that is not a debate. All the best golfers have gotten into that K position at impact over the period of as long as golf's been around. It's just how we're going to load the body correctly and use the big muscles in our body, which abs, glutes, and hips. So we need to use this part of our body to really create power driving into the golf ball. Now the debate is the top of the swing. What are we doing with our hips? And I'm going to simplify this really quick on an easy example of how to understand it. So how we think internally really determines how our body reacts. If we look at this range card, as your body, we'll pretend my fingertips are my hips. Now most of you are thinking, let's move the hips. And you gotta get your hips to here. So you're going, I'm gonna move my hips. So you're moving your hips and you're getting it to your lead side. So what that's doing is this. So you're thinking, move the hips now. So you get to the top of the swing and go, move my hips. And you go like that. And you can see when I'm doing that, my whole body is shifting. If you watch where my head is, it's sliding forward, and now your back sliding forward and everything's sliding forward. So it's just basically moving the golf ball further back in your stance to make it harder for you to square up the club. Now, as a really good player would do, they wouldn't think about just shifting their hips forward because it's not going to make it easy. So what they're going to do instead of focusing on the hip section, they're going to focus on the top and the bottom. So I want to get my hips to here. So they're going to press their hips in this way. And this is a much more natural way to do it. Right there. So now that brings our hips to where we need to get them to, but we're not thinking shift. We're just pressing our hips. So if we take that example and we put it into our body, that meaning the press in now comes from the top and it comes from the bottom in order to get my hip to move that way. Meaning when you get to the top of the swing, as you first drop your swing into the transition, now this shoulder will start to come down and forward, bump the hip, and press there. At the same time, this right foot is also going to start driving forward into that position. So what the constants we need to make sure we have is the head stays still. If the head stays still, then we're not sliding our back. So when we make that first move from the top, it's there. It's a little press from the inside of that right foot or the trail foot, and it's a little bit of that drop down with that shoulder. So what does that do to the hips? So if you watch my video here of my hips when we're making the backswing, and this isn't an area of debate either. When you get to your backswing, your hips will drop down towards the ground a little bit. That's just what happens in the golf swing because your lead leg is folds. The right or the trail leg doesn't fold as much, so the hips will drop down towards the ground a little bit. As you're making your transition and you're having that shoulder and the press from the top and the bottom, now that hip line is going to flatten out as we get into our bottom of our transition. So top of the swing, start of the transition, bottom of our transition, knees squared up, and you can watch my hips slide just a little bit towards the target. My head stays very still. My hip's not way over here already. We don't want to do that in our golf swing. It's a smooth movement to our left side. We want to set our body up to be able to keep rotating. If we shove our hip way forward over here at the beginning, you can see that's an awkward position and you're not going to be able to make very good contact because the hip is up too soon in the rotation. So what we want to do is take it to the top, shift right there. You can see that arm to the shoulder stays together. We're shifting that shoulder from up here, nice and high, to now almost level into the bottom of our transition. And then from that, I have a little press into the right leg, and that's creating that top and bottom squish, which then resulting to the hip moves to where we need it to go, it's moving towards our target. Now let me hit one really quick so you guys can see it. You're gonna see that movement in the golf swing. I'm not thinking bump my hip, I'm just thinking transition my body. And that is a very efficient swing right there. It flew probably further than my average shots I've been hitting over there. And what's happening in my body is I'm creating positive spine tilt and adding positive spine tilt as I'm coming into the ball, which we want. The more that chest is in this direction, hips are more open, the more weight we're pressing into the golf ball and into our hands. Right there. So my chest is pressing into it, my hips pressing into those hands, and I have this nice solid left side to hit into. Left side's extending, right side's still pressing in through the ground, and then we move it to the finish and we just post up on our lead side. Weights off our back foot. So we need to get our hip stacked on top of that ankle and that lead shoulder at impact. But in order to do that, all we have to do is let that hip drop a little bit through that transition. That brings it over, pushes the hip over, a little press in the foot, and then work through. We're not thinking shift the hip. We're not doing this. That's going to screw everybody up and it's not going to get you anywhere. So I'm going to give you a couple drills to make this work very efficiently for you. And you can utilize these at home, you can utilize these at the driving range, so that when you go to the golf course, it will integrate into your golf swing if you work the pattern change. So the first drill we're going to do is part of my at-home swing drill video. I'm going to put that up top so you guys can see it. And these drills you can do at home, very easy, helps with the transition, helps with the way the body moves, and you can get all these feels through this movement. So what we're going to do, we don't need a club at first. You can do it with a club, but you don't need it. We're going to take our lead arm, we're going to put it across our chest, and we're going to hook it right underneath our elbow. Now we're going to get into our golf posture, and at the top of the swing, right there, we're going to just work on our transitional move, right there. So we're going to feel the press in our feet and that shoulder start driving down. You can see my hip tilt at this point, knees are squared up, hips are nice and flat. And then as we come into it, the hip has to tilt downwards and open up, so then the right side starts getting lower. So we can keep moving through, right side lower, left side higher. So you just go back and forth doing that drill, getting that first feel of that shoulder, start dropping underneath, and that press in that right foot or the trail foot. Back and forth. And we're not thinking about the hips, we're just thinking about the feeling in our shoulder, inside foot. And if you watch me do it from this side, you can see how the shoulders start to open up very quickly, hips open up, and then that gets you into the next drill. So the next drill is a 1, 2, 3 drill. You can do this without the club, you can do it with a golf club, so we're gonna do it with the golf club here. And that is take it to the top of the swing. We're at the top, we're gonna go 1 to the top, 2 to transition. 1 to top, 2 to transition. We're just trying to take that feeling we just had, maintaining that shoulder and arm position, and then getting that press with that right foot or the trail foot, and getting that first move. So it's 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. You can see my hips already starting to move in the right direction. Now from there, once you get that first 1, 2 move, dialed in, now we're going to shift to 3, which is to the finish. 1 to the top, 2 to transition, 3 to finish. And that brings your body straight to where we need to be and right where we need to be at impact. So if we do that and stop at impact, 1 to the top, 2 to transition, there's your impact position, right where we need to be, and then we work to the finish. Simple drill right there that you guys can do at home or at the golf course and build pattern into your golf swing. So I love simple training aids, and this is one of the more simple ones we can do, and it's a great drill. So we're gonna grab a water bottle, about halfway full of water, and we're gonna put that water bottle in the instep of our trail shoe, right there, right in the middle. See it looking down right onto your shoelace, right in the middle of the shoelaces, right in the middle of the arch. And what we're going to do from here is just get the feeling of pressing that right foot or the trail foot in as we're starting to make our downswing into impact. This is going to create the bottom part of the press so that we can get the hip to move to our lead side in a more natural way. So as we come into the ball, we're just going to knock that water bottle over. And the nice thing about using that water bottle drill is you can see where the direction of it, where it falls, you can feel it and you can hear it. Those 3 things are very important to create feedback for our timing and the way that we're moving our weight through our feet and towards our target. Now, if you're one that doesn't move your feet very well, you might completely miss that water bottle. And that's not what we want to do. So it gives you a good concentration point to find that correct movement to press as we're starting our transition. At the same time, we're moving that right shoulder forward and down. So press, and that shoulder moves forward and drops down, letting the left shoulder come up a little bit. Helps flatten out the hip line as we come into the bottom of the transition, and then that allows the transition for our hips to drop down lower through the impact. Everything on the ball side will be lower, everything on the trail side will be higher. Golfers, thank you for watching this week. Please don't get bogged down in all the confusion out there on YouTube about hip bump. Hip bump is something you don't really need to think about. If we're properly moving our feet, and if we're properly shifting our shoulders movement from the top of the swing into the bottom of our transition, the hip bump or the hip press or the weight shift in our hips will naturally happen from the top and the bottom pressing down on our trail side. Think about just moving the way that we've been talking about in our videos, in the past videos, and how to transition from our feet and how to transition by maintaining that arm to the chest through that first move in the golf swing. This will make it so much easier, I promise. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, I would really appreciate all the support as I grow my channel. And remember, if your feet aren't working, your swing's not working. I'll catch you guys next time.